Courtney Sherwood is a past winner of the Sledgehammer Fiction Writing Contest and Wordstock's Flash Writing Competition. Her fiction has been published in The Gravity of the Thing, and her nonfiction has appeared in the Seattle Times, the Oregonian, and lots of elsewhere. Courtney Sherwood.
Yeah. Courtney! Yeah. Okay. This story is, for now, called How Did I Find You? Okay. And it's inspired by real events, although it did not actually happen. It's just inspired. Anyhow.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Or maybe it did. How did I find you? I should start at the beginning. I first noticed something wrong at 7-Eleven. For 5 years, the clerk, his name tag said David, had been trying to save me money. If you buy 2 Cokes, it costs less, he'd say, and I'd politely decline, looking at the counter as he stared off into space. Day after day, 5 days a week, at the end of my lunch hour power walk, I'd stop by. Every day was the same. This time, the clerk didn't even seem to care if I paid for my Coke, let alone saved money. When I approached the counter, he looked directly into my eyes and winked. "How doodly you doodly," he said. Then, with barely restrained mirth, "Doodly doo!" And he exploded into giggles, shaking a fistful of Slim Jims at me as I swiped my card and hurried out with the Coke. Maybe the clerk was a different kind of person than I'd imagined. I tried to put it out of my mind as I headed back to work, processed expense reports that afternoon, but I couldn't stop thinking about the doodly-doo. Next day, things got weirder. Christine, the regional sales manager, wore a tutu to the office. I don't usually interact with Christine. I'm in operations. We're in a different part of the building. But she seemed to make a point of skipping and prancing around the halls just to be sure we'd all see her. How did I find you? You remember what it was like back then, right? I think it took a few weeks before we got to the point where people were really talking about it, like on the news and things. I had a theory that Christine had hidden a camera somewhere and was going to post her stunt on YouTube. Either that or it was a wacky motivational technique. The sales team has always been a bit off. It was weird when she kept wearing tutus and dancing around for the rest of the week. But Christine was the highest ranking manager in her division. Nobody wanted to rat her out to corporate, so there was no one around to really do anything about it. Back at 7-Eleven, David kept scanning the barcodes on my Coke, accepting my credit card payments, but it was almost as though through muscle memory. He started hoarding jerky. First, it was just the Slim Jims, then all the other dried meat in the store. Took everything out of its packaging and started piling it together into some kind of meat statue. Asked for jerky and he'd either snarl or break into song, Achy Breaky Heart by Billy Ray Cyrus. It was weird. I'm pretty sure I was one of the first people to start noticing a pattern. Christine with the tutus, David with the Slim Jims. A week after those two, I came home to find Mr. and Mrs. Murphy, my next door neighbors, crawling nude through the grass on their front lawn, eyes searching for who knows what. After the McMurphys, when David and Christine had already been acting crazy for more than a week, I drew a little map of all the places I'd seen strange things. I didn't just highlight the people I knew firsthand. I'd seen a homeless-looking man giving money to strangers at a bus stop. I'd seen a cop set up a checkpoint on a small side street and then hug everyone who stopped to show ID. I'd seen more. When I mapped it all out, the weirdness seemed to be organized in clusters. I didn't quite understand the pattern, if you could even call it that, but it wasn't random. Posted the map to Facebook, and people started sharing it left and right. That was a few days before it blew up in the news, when everyone was talking, but nobody really knew what we were talking about. That's when it seemed to accelerate. At maybe the 2.5, 3 week point, you would know better than me, right? All I know is, all of a sudden, half the people everywhere seemed to be crazy. It was a weird crazy, though. Like, Christine stopped talking, but she kept coming into the office, crazy tutu and all. She even filed an expense report. David kept selling me Cokes, and somebody must have been delivering things and stocking the shelves and stuff, but when he wasn't selling junk food and cigarettes, all of his attention was focused on the sculpture he was building out of dried meat. It looked like some kind of an animal, a cat maybe. If half of the people in the world went crazy, you'd expect the power to go off, the water to stop running, collisions in the street. But none of that happened. Instead, the non-crazy half of civilization posted 1 million new videos to YouTube in a single day. And Huffington Post, CNN, everybody everybody and nobody started yammering on all the time. It was like this was some kind of mystery that we could solve through citizen journalism, or private investigators, or maybe even science. Half of the world was crazy and the rest of us were fools. I've never been close to my parents, but I started calling them every night to make sure they were still sane, to tell them I was still okay. One night they didn't answer. We'd made a plan for that. I called a family friend who verified that Mom and Dad had gone over to the weird side, but they were safe. I called the friend back the next morning, no answer. So far, everyone who'd been affected seemed pretty safe. I worried, but I kept going back to work. Before long, Mitchell and I were the only normals at the office. The internet was still there, Facebook still worked, YouTube continued to host the million videos posted in a single day, but the online world was mostly quiet. One or two friends had checked in that morning to report they were still functioning. Mitchell works at the warehouse and I work in administration, but we both pulled into the parking lot at the same time and stood together as Christine danced to a colleague's accordion improvisations and 6 receptionists from different departments walked single file, bent over, flapping their arms and quacking. "Looks like we're all that's left of this place," I said. "I wonder why we keep coming back," he asked. By then, my cubicle was filled with maps and charts. I'd stopped doing my actual job after the last manager crossed over to the crazies, and now I was spending all my time trying to understand what was happening around me. As the internet got quieter, the patterns I discerned grew more defined. The next day, Mitchell and I pulled in together again. He smiled and began to yodel. He'd been the last sane person in my life, and I panicked. Left him in the parking lot, ran to my cubicle, and spread all my notes and a big map on the floor. Crazies had been confirmed on every continent before the TV news crews had succumbed and replaced our regular programming with their new surreal creations, a montage of broken clocks and watches one day, pig Latin hour the next. But I couldn't find any reports from before David and Christine. Portland seemed to be ground zero. A few days after us, crazies showed up in Seattle, then Reno, San Diego. It took a little longer than that for people in San Francisco to realize this wasn't one of their city's normal quirks. Then it started spreading east. Was I the last sane person left? Am I? You're so quiet. But you did ask how I found you. That's not a crazy question. It was pretty much luck. The earliest crazies showed up in 3 different parts of the city. The hilly, tree-lined streets near my office in 7-Eleven, North Portland near the airport, and far southeast near an old amusement park. I had to Google how to find the middle of a triangle. It's been so long since I did any math like that. But even before I did the calculations, my eye told me that this green patch on the map was what I would find. Mount Tabor. The cinder core of an ancient volcano, home to half the city's water supply. Did you draw on some kind of old world volcano magic, or just poison the water? Why Portland first? Did you know it would spread this far? Yes, that's how I found you. I want some answers, and here you are. White lab coat, knowing grin at the center of everything, and we're the last 2 sane people left. Aren't we?
I didn't think she was going to wear the tutu.